I grew up in Seattle, Washington, and pretty typical life. Good family, brothers, sisters. I was really big into sports, football, basketball. Those were my primary sports, and really kind of my life. That was my main focus. And then about it was my junior year going into my senior year. My family, we all moved to Texas. So from Seattle, Washington to Dallas, Texas. And it was my junior year, I got hurt in football. And so when we moved down to Texas, we moved from, rainy, cold weather to Dallas, Texas, where it was like 105 degrees, and I was in a back brace. And I wasn't able to play sports. I wasn't able to immediately get friends like I thought I would. I thought I would just have friends, right? Like, growing up in one place your whole life, you just have friends, right? There's not this experience of gaining friends or anything. You just have friends, and through sports had a lot of affiliation with people, and anyway, so I moved down to this new place that was culturally so different, and I all of a sudden was eating lunch by myself in the library, and all of a sudden I had all this extra time, and I couldn't identify myself with the athletes. I identified myself as this guy from Seattle that was into Nirvana and started getting into punk rock, and it just totally not what Texas was, and it was one of the hardest, up to that point, the hardest time in my life. I remember. Anyways, so then I started to explore other things, not drugs, and I'm just saying, like, started to explore other things, meaning like because I had this, all of a sudden I had this newfound free time and I had no friends, and I started to get really involved in art and creating, and I started taking all of these AP art classes, whether it was art history, whether it was actually art itself, like actual, fine art, whether it's painting, illustration. And I got obsessed with it. That's all I did. And I was kind of tapping into my younger childhood of when I used to draw and color and create. And I spent this whole year creating and writing and sketching and really kind of exploring this new world. And in fact, my only scholarships coming out of high school were all to art schools. And it was the only fives on my AP tests were in art. And it was this totally different side. And so I really kind of, in that time of life where I would have probably just focused on sports and friends, it was this really big time of reflection of like, what did I like to do above and beyond sports? What did the fact that I like to create and invent and learn about certain things, and about history, and about the great, the great polymaths, of the Renaissance, from Leonardo to Michelangelo. And it was very different in a time of my life. And then I went to school saying, well, I can't do art, so I'm not going to go to any art school because you can't make money doing art. I'm going to be a businessman, and my parents will be proud of me. And so I went into economics and finance, and I appreciated that because I kind of learned how to problem solve very challenge. Like, I remember from econometrics to applied econometrics to different calculus classes, how they were never applicable in real life. And yet it allowed me to really learn how to problem solve and learn how to break problems up into smaller problems, and to then start to solve those and to put puzzles together. And I liked that. But again, going back to, well, I can't have a career in art. I can't have a career in applied econometrics. And so then I applied to go into, the coolest thing at the time was either investment banking or management consulting. And I wanted to do management consulting. That was the cool thing. That's what all the cool kids were doing. I got a couple good interviews, did okay in those. I got an offer to a management consulting firm. And during this time, I was just interning with a software company that was near our house called Intuit. And that was before software was cool, before tech was cool, all of that. We were still doing desktop software. And then we had our first child, and our first child had a bunch of issues. Multiple surgeries within, 10 surgeries within the first year of her life. But when she was born, there was some really tough things going on. And I was facing this career path of, do I want to be gone Monday through Thursday every single week? And of course, I was in my 20s. I was like, yeah, travel the world, get to meet some really great people, fast paced, 100-hour work weeks, great. And yet it just really did not overlap well with this other passion of my life, which was my wife and my new daughter. And so what's funny is then I went on to spend a lot of time at Intuit, which I'll share a bit more in a minute, but we did these things at Intuit called, journey maps or whatever. And you would map out, kind of happy, sad, or excited, or upset, or difficult, or pleasant along this period of time over your career. And everybody that did these, and as you came into a new team or you became a new leader, we had this culture of sharing out our journey. And almost everybody's Intuit was high on their chart, and mine was the lowest point in my journey, because it felt like at the time I was completely settling. I made the hard choice very early on to not pursue this management consulting sexy job that allowed me to travel and work with big companies, but to go work for this corporate America 9 to 5, surrounded by 30 and 40-year-olds who had families. And I felt like I settled. And it was kind of who knows what's going to happen. But with that said, I loved Intuit. I loved the culture. I loved the people. I loved the problems we were trying to solve. And I've shared this in a couple different venues, but I started out in corporate strategy and finance, and I think one of my first titles was business model innovation. And so I was looking at the world differently, and or Intuit differently, and I was trying to be strategic and thoughtful. And then there was a product manager, which I'd never really knew anything about, but there was this product manager that got up on the stage. And it was right after the CEO or a general manager. So it was the executives talking. And then this product manager came up and he shared this story about this customer that had this really painful personal experience. And then he went on to articulate the solution or vision that they had to solve this individual's problem, and that individual represented a larger group of people that made this problem big and important, but yet it was unsolved. And then he went on to articulate how they would solve it and his vision for changing that person's life so much so that they couldn't imagine going back to the old way. And then he talked about and showed some designs and what, kind of got clicked down into the actual experience and again, the insights and the learnings. And he had this team of engineers and designers. And I thought, oh my gosh, what is that? That's what I want to do for the rest of my life. And so it was that brief moment. And then I went through the process of making the change from strategy to product management. And what I realized is product management, at least this was in my words, was product management is strategy, but with engineers. I actually get to go build the solution. I'm not going to just provide a recommendation to a solution. And that was so satisfying. And then I found myself in a place where I loved spending time with customers, and I loved the anthropology, aspect of product management. And I loved the early sketches and sitting with a customer and sketching something out and say, well, what do you think about this? And that rapid iteration. And at the time I didn't know what it was called but intuitively it made sense for me to sketch things out and to work closely with a customer on the solution once I really understood and grasped the problem. Once I really kind of felt like it was my problem, and what I had noticed in that is that my passion for solving a problem became infectious. That all of a sudden there were people around me, there were engineers, there were designers, and leaders that wanted me to go solve this problem. And then so I just started building things and started taking on different roles, bigger responsibility, and to ultimately where it. And they did this really cool thing at Intuit where there's this big coveted award, and it's called the Scott Cook Innovation Award. And Scott Cook is the kind of the best product manager in the world in my mind. I feel like he's crafted what product management is at its finest, and he created this award called the Scott Cook Innovation Award. And if you won it, you didn't get necessarily money. You did get some money. You got a trip or award. You got fame and not fortune, but you got a big poster of yourself, and it was across every campus at Intuit, and it stayed up there for a year, and everybody who knew who you were. But the biggest gift he realized that he could give was time. And so if you won the Scott Cook Innovation Award, you got 3 to 6 months to build and work on whatever you wanted. And what I decided I wanted to do was I wanted to go and build something and scale one of our products or platforms that were winning in the US and take them abroad. And so my family and I moved to London, and we were there for a couple years, and we were working at an office of 100 people. And then we went and launched the office in Paris, France. And all of a sudden QuickBooks was this brand, this new brand with zero market awareness or zero household awareness. And it felt like I was in a startup, and it felt like everything was against us except the fact that we had resources, but we were starting over, and it felt like I was part of this something very special. And after doing that, I was then asked to, after we finished what we came out to do there and it turned out being a couple of years. And when I was asked to come back to Mountain View, I just didn't want to. I wanted to keep this startup thing going. And that's when I came to New York City to join a startup called Namely, who you might be familiar with, and to lead their product and design team. And then from there, and I can go into this in more detail, but from there I joined Pendo, where now again I lead product and design and data science, and have been part of this rocket ship ride that Pendo has been on, where I'm now building a product and a platform for product managers. I'm finally building the tool that I've always wanted as a product manager to enable the practice of product, what I believe the practice of product management to be, which is to be customer backed and data driven and intuitive, to take insights and turn them into actions. And we're on a mission to build that platform for product teams. And so now I spend time all over the world with product leaders and product teams and wrestle with them and problem solve with them about how do we help you solve your biggest problems, and then how do I take a step back and find the insights and the themes that can not only help these teams but help teams across the world trying to build better products.